Word of Mouth is an adult story time presented by the Juliette Hampton Morgan Memorial Library. News stories are posted every month on the second Sunday at 2:30 p.m. If you enjoy today's program, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube page or following our Facebook. As a reminder, some stories contain adult language and content. It is recommended you review stories before allowing younger audiences to listen.
Hello, my name is Patrick Hutzler. I'm a librarian here at the Juliette Hampton Morgan Memorial Library, and today I'll be reading the book Neil Gaiman's Fragile Things, Short Fictions and Wonders. We'll be reading the short story A Study in Emerald along with the poems Fairy Reel, Going Wando, and Hidden Chambers. Well, I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Reading the poem The Fairy Reel. Let us begin. If I were young as once I was, and dreams and death were more distant then, I wouldn't split my soul in two and keep half in the world of men. So half of me would stay at home and strive for fairy in vain. While all the world my soul would stroll up narrow paths and down crooked lanes, and there would meet a fairy lass and smile and bow with kisses three. She'd pluck wild eagles from the air and nail me to a lightning tree. And if my heart would run from her, or flee from her, be gone from her, she'd wrap it in a nest of stars, and then she'd take it on with her, until one day she'd tire of it, all bored with it and done with it. She'd leave it by a burning brook, and off brown boys would run with it. They take it and have fun with it, and stretch it long and cruel and thin. They slice it into four, and then they string it with a violin. And every day and every night they play upon my heart a song, so plaintive and so wild and strange, that all who heard it danced along, and sang and whirled and sank and trod, and skipped and slipped and reeled and rolled, until with eyes as bright as coal, they crumble into wheels of gold. But I am young no longer now. For 60 years my heart's been gone, to play its dreadful music there beyond the valley of the sun. I watch with envious eyes and mind the single souled, who dare not feel the wind that blows beyond the moon, who do not hear the fairy reel. If you do not hear the fairy reel, they will not pause to steal your breath. When I was young, I was a fool, so wrap me up in dreams and death. This is the reading of the Fairy Reel. The poem Going Wando. Shedding my shirt, my books, my coat, my life, leaving empty husks and fallen leaves. Going in search of food and for a spring of sweet water. I'll find a tree as wide as 10 fat men, clear water riling over its gray roots. Berries I'll find, and crab apples and nuts, and I'll call it home. I'll tell the wind my name and no one else. True madness takes or leave us in the woods halfway through all our lives. My skin will be my face now. I must be nuts. Sense left with shoes and house, my guts are cramped. I'll stumble through the green, back to my roots, and leave and thorns and buds and shiver. I'll leave the way of words to walk the woods, and I'll be the forest man, and greet the sun, and feel the silence blossom on my tongue like language. That was Going Wando. We will now be reading the poem Hidden Chamber. Do not fear the ghosts in this house. They are the least of your worries. Personally, I find the noises they make reassuring. The creaks and the footsteps in the night, their little tricks of hiding things or moving them, I find endearing, not unsettling. It makes the place feel so much more like home, inhabited. Apart from the ghosts, nothing lived here for long. No cats, no mice, no flies, no dreams, no bats. 2 days ago, I saw a butterfly, a monarch, I believe, which danced from room to room, and perched on walls and waited near to me. There were no flowers in this empty place, and scared the butterfly would starve, I forced a window wide. I cut my two hands around her fluttering self, feeling her wings kiss my palm so gentle, and put her out and watched her fly away. I've little patience with seasons here, but your arrival eased this winter's chill. Please wander around. Explore it all you wish. I've broken with tradition on some points. If there is one locked room here, you'll never know. You'll not find in the cellar's fireplace old bones or hair. You'll find no blood, regard, just tools, a washing machine, a dryer, a water heater, and a chain of keys. Nothing that can alarm you, nothing dark. I may be grim, perhaps, but only just as grim as any man who suffers such affairs. Misfortune, carelessness, or pain. What matters is the loss. You'll see the heartbreak linger in my eyes, and dreams of making me forget what came before you walked into the hallway of this house. Bring a little summer in your glance, and with your smile. While you are here, of course you will hear the ghosts, always a room away. And you may wake beside me in the night knowing that there's a space without a door, knowing that there's a place that's locked but isn't there, hearing them scuffle, echo, thump, and pound. If you are wise, you'll run into the night, fluttering away into the cold, wearing perhaps the laciest of shifts. The lane's hard flints will cut your feet all bloody as you run. So I wished I could just follow you, tasting the blood and the ocean of your tears. I'll wait instead. Here in my private place, and soon I'll put a candle in the window, love, to light your way back home. The world flutters like insects. I think this is how I shall remember you. My head between the white swells of your breasts, listening to the chambers of your heart. That was Hidden Chamber. We'll be reading A Study in Emerald, Chapter 1, The New Friends. Fresh from their stupendous European tour, where they performed before several of the crowned heads of Europe, garnering their platitudes and praise with magnificent dramatic performances, combining both comedy and tragedy, the Strange players wish to make it known they shall be appearing at the Royal Court Theatre, Drury Lane, for a limited engagement in April, at which they will present My Look-alike Brother Tom, The Littlest Violin Seller, and The Great Old Ones Come. This last an historical epic of pageantry and delight. Each an entire play in one act. Tickets are available now at the ticket booth. It is the immensity, I believe, the hugeness of the thing below, the darkness of dreams. But I am wool gathering, forgive me. I am not a literary man. I have been in need of lodging. That was how I met him. I wanted someone to share the cost of rooms with me. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance in the chemical laboratories of St. Bart's. You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive. That was what he said to me, and my mouth felt open, and my eyes opened very wide. Astonishing, I said. Not really, said the stranger in the white lab coat, who was to become my friend. From the way you hold your arm, I see that you've been wounded in a particular way. You have a deep tan. You also have a military bearing, and there are few enough places in the empire that a military man, being both tanned and given the nature of your injury to your shoulder, and the traditions of Afghan cave folks. Tortured? Put like that, of course, it was absurdly simple. But then it always was. I had been tanned nut brown, and I had indeed, as he'd been observed, been tortured. The gods and men of Afghanistan were savages, unwilling to be ruled from Whitehall, or from Berlin, or even from Moscow, and unprepared to see reason. I had been sent into those hills, attached to the regiment. As long as the fighting regiment remained in the hills and mountains, we fought on equal footing. When the skirmishes descended into the caves and the darkness, then we found ourselves, as it were, out of our depths and in over our heads. I shall not forget the mirrored surface of the underground lake, nor the thing that emerged from the lake, its eyes opening and closing, and the singing whisper that accompanied it as it rose, wreathing their way about it, like buzzing flies bigger than worlds. That I survived was a miracle, but survive I did, and I returned to England with my nerves in shreds and tatters. The place that leech-like mouth had touched me was tattooed forever, frog white into the skin of my now withered shoulder. I had once been a crack shot. Now I had nothing to save a fear of the world beneath the world, akin to panic, which meant that I would gladly pay 6 pence of my army pension for a hansom cab rather than a penny to travel underground. Still, the fogs and darkness of London comforted me, took me in. I had lost my first lodging because I screamed in the night. I had been in Afghanistan. I was there no longer. I scream in the night, I told him. And I have been told that I snore, he said. Also, I keep irregular hours, and I often use the mantelpiece for target practice. I will need the sitting room to meet clientele. I am selfish, private, and easily bored. Will this be a problem? I smiled and shook my head and extended my hand. We shook on it. The rooms he found for us in Baker Street were more than adequate for two bachelors. I bore in mind all my friend had said about his desire for privacy, and I forbore from asking him what it was he did for a living. Still, there was much to pique my curiosity. Visitors would arrive at all hours, and when they did, I would leave the sitting room and repair to my bedroom, pondering what they could have in common with my friend. The pale woman with one eye bone white, the small man who looked like a commercial traveler, the portly dandy in his velvet jacket, and the rest. Some were frequent visitors. Many others came in only once, spoke to him, and left, looking troubled or looking satisfied. He was a mystery to me. We were partaking of one of our landlady's magnificent breakfasts one morning, when the bell rang to summon that good lady. "There will be a gentleman joining us in about 4 minutes," he said, "and we will need another place at the table." "Very good," she said. "I'll put more sausages under the grill." My friend returned to pursuing his morning papers. I waited for an explanation with growing impatience. Finally, I could withstand it no longer. "I don't understand. How could you know that in 4 minutes we would be receiving a visitor? There is no telegram, no message of any kind." He smiled thinly. "Did you not hear the clatter of the brougham? Several minutes ago. It slowed as it passed us. Obviously, the driver identified our door. Then it sped up and went past into Marylebone Road. There was a crush of carriages and a taxicab letting off passengers at the railway station. and the wax works, and it is in that crush that anyone wishing to align without being observed will go. The walk from there to here is about 4 minutes. He glanced at his pocket watch, and as he did so, I heard a tread on the stairs coming outside. "Come in, Lestrade," he said. "The door is ajar, and your sausages are coming out from under the grill." A man I took to be Lestrade opened the door, and then closed it carefully behind him. "I should not," he said, "but to tell the truth, I've not had a chance to break my fast this morning, and I could certainly do justice to a few of those sausages." He was a small man, I observed, on several occasions previously, whose demeanor was that of a traveler in rubber novelties and patent nostrums. My friend waited until our landlady had left the room before he said, Obviously, I take it that this is a matter of national importance." "My stars," said Lestrade as he paled. "Surely the word cannot be out already. Tell me it is not." He began to pile his plate high with sausages, kippers, fillets, categories, and toast, but his hands shook a little. "Of course not," he said. "I know the squeak of your burro's wheels, though after all this time, an oscillating G, sharp and above high C. And if Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard cannot publicly be seen to come to the parlor of London's only consulting detective, yet comes anyway without having had his breakfast, then I know it is not a routine case. Ergo, it involves those above us. It is a matter of national importance." Lestrade dabbed egg yolk from his chin with his napkin. I stared at him. He did not look like my idea of a police inspector. But then my friend looked a little enough like my idea of a consulting detective, whatever that might be. "Perhaps we should discuss the matter privately," Lestrade said, glancing at me. My friend began to smile impishly. As his head moved on his shoulders, as it did, he was enjoying a private joke. "Nonsense," he said. "Two heads are better than one, and what is said to one of us is said to both of us." "If I'm intruding," I said gruffly, but he motioned me to silence. Lestrade shrugged. "It's all the same to me," he said, after a moment. "If you solve the case, then I have my job. If you don't, then I have no job. If you use your method, that's what I say. I can't make things any worse. If there's one thing that a study of history has taught us, it is that things can always get worse, my friend. When do we go to Shoreditch?" Lestrade dropped his fork. "That is too bad," he exclaimed. "Here you are making sport of me when you know all about the matter. You should be ashamed." "No one has told me anything in the matter. When a police inspector walks into my room with fresh splashes of mud, a particular mustard yellow hue on his boot, and trouser legs, I can surely be forgiven for assuming that he has recently walked back the digging at Hobbs Lane in Shoreditch, which is the only place in London that particular mustard-colored clay seems to be found." Inspector Lestrade looked embarrassed. "Now you put it like that," he said, "it seems obvious." My friend pushed his plate away from him. "Of course it does," he said, slightly testily. We rode to the East End in a cab, and Inspector Lestrade had walked up to Marylebone Road to find his borough, and left us alone. "So you truly are a consulting detective," I said. "The only one in London, or perhaps the world," said my friend. "I do not take cases. Instead, I consult. Others bring me their insoluble problems. They describe them, or sometimes I solve them. They describe them, and sometimes I solve them. then those people who come to you are the main police officers or detectives themselves. It was a fine morning, but we were now jolting about the edges of the rookeries at St. Giles, that warren of thieves and cutthroat, which sits on London like a cancer on the face of the pretty flower seller. And only light to enter a cab was a dim and faint. "Are you sure that you wish me along with you?" In reply, my friend stared at me without blinking. "I have a feeling," he said. "I have a feeling that we're meant to be together. That we have fought a good fight, side by side in the past, or in the future. I do not know. I am a rational man, but I have learned the value of a good companion, and for the moment I clapped my eyes on you. I knew I trusted you as well as I do myself. Yes, I want you with me." I blushed, or said something meaningless. For the first time since Afghanistan, I felt that I had worth in the world. Chapter 2. The Room. Victors vitae, an electrical fluid. Do your limbs and nether regions lack life? Do you look back on the days of your youth with envy? Are the pleasures of the flesh not buried and forgot? Victors vitae will bring life where life has been lost. Even the oldest warhorse can be a proud stallion once more, bringing life to the dead. An old family recipe of the best of modern science, to receive signed attestations of the efficacy of Victors vitae, write to the V. Vaughan F. Company, 1B Cheap Street, London. It was a cheap rooming house in the Shoreditch. There was a policeman at the front door. Lestrade greeted him by name and made to usher us in, and I was ready to enter. But my friend squatted on the doorstep and pulled a magnifying glass from his coat pocket. He examined the mud on the wrought iron boot scraper, prodding with his forefinger. Only when he was satisfied would he let us go inside. We walked upstairs. The room in which the crime had been committed was obvious. It was flanked by two burly constables. Lestrade nodded to the men, and they stood aside. We walked in. I am not, as I said, a writer by profession. I hesitate to describe that place, knowing that my words cannot do it justice. Still, I have begun this narrative, and I fear I must continue. A murder has been committed in that little bedsit. The body what was left of it was still there on the floor. I saw it, but at first somehow I did not see it. What I saw instead was what had sprayed and gushed from the throat, the chest of the victim. In color it ranged from bile green to grass green. It has soaked into the threadbare carpet and splattered on the wallpaper. I imagined it, for one moment, the work of some hellish artist who decided to create a study in emerald. After what seemed like 100 years, I looked down at the body, open like a rabbit on a butcher's table, and tried to make sense of what I saw. I removed my hat, and my friend did the same. He knelt and inspected the body, examining the cuts, the gashes. Then he pulled out his magnifying glass and walked over to the wall, examining the gouts of drying ichor. We've already done that," said the Inspector Lestrade. "Indeed," said my friend. "What did you make of this, then, I believe? It is a word." Lestrade walked into the place my friend was standing, and looked up. There was a word written in capital in green blood on the faded yellow wallpaper, some little ways above Lestrade's head. Rache? Rache, said Lestrade, spelling it out. Obviously he was going to write Rachel, but he was interrupted, so he must look for a woman? My friend said nothing. He walked back to the corpse and picked up its hand, one after the other. The fingertips were clean of ichor. I think we have established that the word was not written by His Royal Highness. What the devil makes you say? My dear Lestrade, please give me some credit for having a brain. The corpse is obviously not that of a man. The color of his blood, the number of his limbs, the eyes, the position of the face, all these things bespeak of royal blood. While I cannot say which royal line, I would haphazard that he is an heir. Perhaps, no, second in line to the throne? At one of the German principalities? That is amazing, Lestrade hesitated. Then he said, This is Prince Drago of Bohemia. He was here in Albion as a guest of Her Majesty Victoria. Here for a holiday and a change of air. For the theatre, the whores, and the gambling tables, you mean. If you say so, Lestrade looked put out. Anyway, you've given us a fine lead with this Rachel woman, though I don't doubt we would have found her on our own. Doubtless, said my friend. He inspected the room further, committing acidly several times that the police, with their boots, had obscured footprints and moved things that might have been of use to anyone attempting to reconstruct the evidence of the previous night. Still, he seemed interested in a small patch of mud he found behind the door. Beside the fireplace, he found what appeared to be some ash or dirt. Did you see this? He asked Lestrade. Her Majesty's police, replied Lestrade, tend not to be excited by ash in a fireplace. It's where ash tends to be found. And he chuckled at that. My friend took a pinch of ash and rubbed it between his fingers, then sniffed the remains. Finally, he scooped up what was left of the material and tipped it into the glass vial, which he stoppered and placed in the inner pocket of his coat, and he stood up. And the body? Lestrade said the palace will send their own people. My friend nodded at me, and together we walked to the door. My friend sighed. Inspector, your quest for Miss Rachel may prove fruitless. Among other things, Rache is a German word. It means revenge. Check your dictionary. There are other meanings. We reached the bottom of the stairs and walked out into the street. You've never seen royalty before this morning, have you? He asked. I shook my head. Well, the sight can be unnerving if you're unprepared. Why, my good fellow, are you trembling? Forgive me, I shall be fine in moments. Would it do you good to walk? He asked, and I assented, certain that if I did not, then I would begin to scream. West, then, said my friend, pointing to the dark tower of the palace, and we commenced to walk. So, said my friend after some time, you've never had a personal encounter with any of the crowned heads of Europe? No, I said. I believe I can confidently state that you shall, he told me, and I believe with the corpse this time, not with a corpse this time, very soon. My dear fellow, wherever makes you believe. In reply, he pointed to the carriage, black painted, that had pulled up 50 yards ahead of us. A man in a black top hat and a great coat stood by the door, holding it open, waiting silently. A coat of arms familiar to every child in Albion was painted in gold upon the carriage door. There are invitations one does not refuse, my friend said. He doffed his own hat to the footman, and I do believe he was smiling as he climbed to the box-like space and relaxed back into the soft, leathery cushions. When I attempted to speak with him during the journey to the palace, he placed his finger over his lips. He closed his eyes and seemed sunk deep in thought. I, for my part, tried to remember what I knew of German royalty, but apart from the Queen's consort, Prince Albert, being German, I knew little enough. I put a hand in my pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, brown and silver, black and copper green. I stared at the portrait stamped on each one of them of our Queen and felt both patriotic pride and stark dread. I told myself I had once been a military man and a stranger to fear, and I could remember when this had been the plain truth. For a moment, I remember the time when I had been a crack shot, even, I like to think, something of a marksman. But my right hand shook as if it were palsied, and the coins jingled and chinked, and I felt only regret. Chapter 3. The Palace. At long last, Dr. Henry Jekyll is proud to announce the general release of the world-renowned Jekyll powders. For popular consumption, no longer the province of the privileged few. Release the inner you. For inner and outer cleanliness, too many people, both men and women, suffer from constipation of the soul. Relief is immediate and cheap with Jekyll's powders. Available in vanilla and original methanol formulation. The Queen's consort, Prince Albert, was a big man with an impressive handlebar mustache and receding hairline. He was undeniably and entirely human. He met us in the corridor and nodded to my friend and to me. Did not ask us for our names or offer to shake hands. The Queen is most upset, he said. He had an accent and pronounced his s as z and most upset. Franz was one of her favorites. She had so many nephews, but he made her laugh so. You would find the ones who did this to him. I will do my best, said my friend. I have read your monographs, said Prince Albert. It was I who told them that you should be consulted. I hope I did right. As do I, said my friend. And then the great doors opened, and we were ushered into the darkness and the presence of the Queen. She was called Victoria, because she had beaten us in battle 700 years before. She was called Gloriana, because she was glorious. And she was called the Queen, because the human mouth was not shaped to say her true name. She was huge, huger than I had imagined possible. She squatted in the shadows, staring down at us without moving. This must be Zuld. The words came from the shadow. Indeed, ma'am, said my friend. A limb squirmed and pointed at me. Zip forward. I walked to my friend. My legs would not move. My friend came to my rescue. He took my elbow and walked me towards Her Majesty. It's not to be afraid. It's not to be worthy. It's not to be a companion. It's to be a companion. That was what she said to me. Her voice was sweet contralto, with a distant buzz. The limbs uncoiled and extended. She touched my shoulder, with a momentary, but only a moment, of a pain deeper and more profound than anything I had ever experienced. Then was replaced by a pervasive sense of well-being. I could feel my muscle in my shoulder relax, and for the first time since Afghanistan, I was free from pain. Then my friend walked forward. Victoria spoke to him, yet I could not hear her words. I wonder if they went somehow directly from her mind to his. If this was the Queen's Council I had read about in the histories. He replied aloud, Certainly, ma'am. I can tell you that there were 2 other men with your nephew in that room. in Shoreditch. That night the footprints were, although obscured, unmistakable. And then, yes, I understand. I believe so. Yes. He was quiet when we left the palace and said nothing to me as we rode back to Baker Street. It was dark already. I wondered how long we had spent in the palace. Fingers of sooty fog twined across the road and the sky. Upon our return to Baker Street in the looking glass of my room, I observed the frog-white skin across my shoulder had taken a pinkish tinge. I hoped I was not imagining it, that it was not merely the moonlight through the window. 4. The performance. Liver complaints, bilious attacks, neuroaesthetic disturbances, quincy, arthritis. These are just a handful of complaints which a professional exterminator can be the remedy. In our offices we have sheaves of testimonials which can be inspected by the public at any time. Do not put your health in the hands of amateurs. We have been doing this for a very long time. V. Tempest, professional exsanguinator. Remember, it is pronounced Tizbez. Romania, Paris, London, Whitby. You've tried the rest. Now try the best. That, my friend, was a master of disguise should have come as no surprise to me. Yet did. Over the next 10 days, a strange assortment of characters came through our door in Baker Street. An elderly Chinese man, a young rogue, a red-haired woman whose former professionals could be of little doubt, and a venerable old buffer, his foot swollen and banged from gout. Each of them walked into my friend's room, and with a speed that would have done justice to a music hall quick change artist, my friend walked out. He would not talk about what he had been doing on these occasions, preferring to relax, staring off into space, occasionally making notions of any scrap paper to hand. Notations I found, frankly, incomprehensible. He seemed entirely preoccupied, so much so that I found myself worrying about his well-being. And then late one afternoon, he came home dressed in his own clothes, with an easy grin upon his face, and he asked if I was interested in theater. As much as the next man, I told him. Then fetch your opera glasses, he told me. We're off to Drury Lane. I had expected a light opera or something of the kind, but instead I found myself in what must have been the worst theater in Drury Lane. For all that it had been named itself after the royal court, and to be honest, it was barely in Drury Lane at all, being situated at the Shaftesbury Avenue end of the road, where the avenue approaches the rookeries of St. Giles. On my friend's advice, I concealed my wallet, and following his example, I carried a stout stick. Once we're seated in the stalls, I had bought a 3-penny orange from the lovely young woman who sold them to the members of the audience, and I sucked at it as we waited. My friend said quietly, "You should only count yourself lucky that you did not need to accompany me to the gambling dens or the brothels, or the madhouses, another place that the Prince Franz delighted in visiting. As I have learned, but there was nowhere he went more often than once, nowhere but." The orchestra struck up, and the curtains were raised. My friend was silent. It was fine enough show in its way. 3 one-act plays were performed. Comic songs were sung between the acts. The leading man was tall, languid, and had a fine singing voice. The leading lady was elegant, and her voice carried through all the theater. The comedian had a fine touch for a patter song. The first play was a broad comedy of mistaken identities. Leading man The leading man played a pair of identical twins who had never met, but had managed to set up a comical misadventure, each one finding himself engaged to be married to the same young lady, who immediately thought herself engaged to only one man. Doors swung open and closed, and the actor changed from identity to identity. The second play was a heartbreaking tale of an orphan girl, starved in the snow, selling hothouse violets. Her grandmother recognized her at the last and swore that she was the babe stolen 10 years back by bandits. But it was too late, and the frozen little angel breathed her last. I must confess I found myself wiping my eyes with my linen handkerchief more than once. The performance finished with a rousing historical narrative. The entire company played the men and women of the village of the shore of the ocean, 700 years before our modern times. They saw shapes rising from the sea in the distance. The hero joyously proclaimed to the villagers that these were the old ones, whose coming was foretold, returning to us from Rael, from the dim Carcosa, and the plains of Ling, where they had slept or waited or passed the time of their death. The comedian opined that the other villagers had all been eating too many pies, drinking too much ale, and that they were imagining shapes. A portly gentleman playing a priest of the Roman god told the villagers that the shapes of the sea were monsters and demons, and must be destroyed. At the climax, the hero beat the priest to death with his own crucifer, and prepared to welcome them as they came. The heroine sang a haunting aria, whilst in an astonishing display of magic lantern trickery, it seemed as if we saw their shadows come across the sky at the back of the stage, the Queen of Albion herself, and the Black Ones of Egypt, in shapes almost like a man, followed by the ancient goat, parent of 1,000 emperor of all China, and the Tsar unanswerable, and he who presides over the New World, and the White Lady of the Antarctic fastness, and the others, as each shadow crossed the stage and prepared to, from out of every throat in the gallery came unbidden the mighty huzzah, until the air itself seemed to vibrate. The moon rose in the painted sky, and then at its height, in one final moment of theatrical magic, it turned from pallid yellow, as it was in the old tales, to the comforting crimson of the moon that shines down upon us all today. The members of the cast took their bow, and their curtain calls to cheers, laughter, and the curtain fell for the last time, and the show was done. There, said my friend, what did you think? Jolly good. Jolly good, I told him, as the hands sore from applauding. Stout fellow, he said, with a smile. Let us go backstage. We walked outside and into an alley beside the theater, to the stage door where a thin woman with a wen on her cheek knitted busily. My friend showed her a visiting card, and she directed us into the building and up some steps into a small communal dressing room. Oil lamps and candles guttered in front of the smeared-looking glasses, and men and women were taking off their makeup and costumes with no regard for the proprieties of gender. I averted my eyes. My friend seemed unperturbed. Might I talk to Mr. Vernet? He asked loudly. The young woman, who had played the heroine's best friend in the first play, and the saucy innkeeper's daughter in the last, pointed us to the end of the room. Sherry! Sherry Vernet, she called. The man who stood up in response was lean, less conventionally handsome than he had seen from the other side of the footlights. He appeared at us quizzically. I do not believe I've had the pleasure. My name is Henry Camberley, said my friend, drawing his speech somewhat. You may have heard of me? I must confess I have not had the privilege, said Burnett. My friend presented the actor with an engraved card. The man looked at the card with unfeigned interest. A theatrical promoter from the New World. My, and this is, he smiled at me. This is a friend of mine, Mr. Sebastian. He is not of the profession. I muttered something about having enjoyed the performance enormously, and shook hands with the actor. My friend said, Have you ever visited the New World? I have not yet had that honor, admitted Burnett, although it would always been my dearest wish. Well, my good man, said my friend, with an easy informality of a New Worlder, you will get your wish. That last play, I've never seen anything like it. Did you write it? Alas, no. The playwright is a good friend of mine, although I've devised the mechanisms of the Magic Lantern Shadow Show. You'll not see finer on the stage today. Would you give me the playwright's name? Perhaps I'll speak with him directly, this friend of yours. Burnett shook his head. That will not be possible, I'm afraid. He is a professional man and does not wish his connections with the stage to be publicly known. I see. My friend pulled a pipe from his pocket and put it in his mouth. Then he patted his pockets. I'm sorry, he began. I forgot to bring my tobacco pouch. I smoke a strong black shag, said the actor, but if you have no objection. None, said my friend heartily. Why, I smoke a strong shag myself. And he filled his pipe with the actor's tobacco, and the two men puffed away. While my friend described a vision he had for a play that could tour the cities of the New World, from Manhattan Island all the way to the furthest tip of the continent in the distant south. The first act would be the last play we had seen. The rest of the plays might perhaps tell of the dominion of the old ones over humanity and its gods, perhaps telling what might have happened if the people had no royal families to look up to, a world of barbarians and darkness. But your mysterious professional man will be the play's author, and what occurs would be him alone to decide, injected my friend. Our drama would be his. I can guarantee you audience beyond your imaginings, and a significant share in the takings at the door. Let us say 50%. This is most exciting, said Mr. Burnett. I hope it will not turn out to be a pipe dream. No, sir, it shall not, said my friend, puffing on his own pipe, chuckling at the man's joke. Come to my room in Baker Street tomorrow, morning after breakfast, at say 10 in the morning, in company with your author friend, and I shall have the contract drawn up and waiting. With that, the actor clambered up upon his chair and clapped his hands for silence. Ladies and gentlemen of the company, I have an announcement to make, he said, his resonant voice filling the room. This gentleman is Henry Caberlet, the theatrical promoter, and is he proposing to take us across the Atlantic and on to fame and fortune. There were several cheers, and the comedian said, Well, it'll make a change from the herring and the pickled cabbage. And the company laughed. And it was the smiles of all of them that we walked out of the theater and onto the fog-wreathed streets. My dear fellow, I said, whatever it was, not a word, said my friend. There are many ears in the city. And not another word was spoken until we had hailed a cab and clambered inside and were rattling across the Charing Cross Road. And even then, before he said anything, my friend took out his pipe from his mouth and emptied half the smoke contents out of the bowl into a small tin. He pressed the lid onto the tin and placed it in his pocket. There, he said, That's the tall man. Found or I'm a Dutchman. Now, we just have to hope that the cupidity and the curiosity of the lighting director proved enough to bring him to us tomorrow morning. The limping doctor? My friend snorted. That is what I've been calling him. It was obvious from footprints and much else besides when we saw the prince's body that two men had been in that room that night. A tall man who, unless I miss my guess, we have just encountered, and a smaller man with a limp, who eviscerated the prince with a professional skill that betrays the medical man. A doctor. Indeed, I hate to say this, but it is my experience that when a doctor goes to the bad, he is fouler than the darker creatures and the worst cutthroat. There was Hudson, the acid bath man, and Campbell, who brought the prosecuting bed up to Ealing, and he carried on a similar vein for the rest of our journey. The cab pulled up beside the curb. That'll be 1 and 10 pence, said the cabby. My friend tossed him a florin, which he caught and tipped to his ragged tall hat. Much obliged to you both, he called out, and the horse clopped into the fog. We walked to our front door. As I unlocked it, my friend said, "Odd. Our cabby just ignored that fellow in the corner." "They do that at the end of a shift," I pointed out. "Indeed they do," said my friend. I dreamed of a shadow that night, that shadow that blotted out the sun. And I called out to them my desperation, but they did not listen. Chapter 5, The Skin and the Pit. This year, step into the spring with spring in your step, jacks, boots, shoes, and brogues. Save your souls, heels are our specialty. Jacks, do not forget to visit our new clothes unfitting emporium in the East End, featuring evening wear of all kinds, hats, novelties, canes, sword sticks, and Jack's of Piccadilly, and it's all in the spring. Inspector Lestrade was the first to arrive. Have you posted your men in the street? Asked my friend. I have, said Lestrade. With strict orders not to let anyone in who comes, but to arrest anyone trying to leave. And you have handcuffs with you. In reply, Lestrade put his hand in his pocket and jingled 2 pair of cuffs grimly. Now, sir, he said, while we wait, why do you not tell me what we are waiting for? My friend pulled his pipe out of his pocket. He did not put it in his mouth. He placed it on the table in front of him. Then he took the tin from the night before, and a glass vial I recognized as the one he had in the room in Shoreditch. There, he said, the nail in the coffin, as I trust it shall prove for our master Vinette. He paused. Then he took out his pocket watch and laid it carefully on the table. We have several minutes before they arrive. He turned to me. What do you know of the Restorationists? Not a blessed thing, I told him. Lestrade coughed. If you're talking about what I think you're talking about, he said, perhaps we should leave it there. Enough's enough. Too late for that, said my old friend. There are those who do not believe that the coming of the old ones was the fine thing we know it to be. Anarchists to a man. They would see the old ways restored, mankind in control of its own destiny, if you will. I will not hear this sedition spoken, said Lestrade. I must warn you not to be such a fathead, said my friend. It was the Restorationists that killed Prince Franz Drago. They murder, they kill in a vain effort to force our master to leave us alone in the darkness. The prince was killed by a race. It's an old term for a hunting dog, Inspector, as you would know if you looked in the dictionary. It means revenge. And the hunter left his signature on the wallpaper in the murder room, just as an artist might sign a canvas. But he was not the one who killed the prince. "The limping doctor!" I exclaimed. "Very good. There's a tall man there that night. I could tell his height from the words was written at eye level. He smoked a pipe, and the ash and dottle sat unburnt in the fireplace. He had tanned out his pipe with ease on the mantel, something a smaller man would not have done. The tobacco was an unusual blend of shag. The footprints in the room had, for the most part, been almost obliterated by your men. But there were several clear prints behind the door and by the window. Someone had waited there, a smaller man from his stride, who put his weight on his right leg. On the path outside, I had several clear prints, and the different colors of clay in the boot scraper gave me information. A tall man had accompanied the prince into those rooms, and had later walked out. Waiting for them to arrive was the man who had sliced up the prince so impressively. Lestrade made an uncomfortable noise that did not quite become a word. I had spent many days retracing his movements of His Highness. I went from gambling hell to brothel to dining den to madhouse, looking for our pipe-smoking man and his friend. I had made no progress until I thought to check the newspapers of Bohemia, searching for a clue to the prince's recent activities there. And in them I learned that an English theatrical troupe had been in Prague last month, and had performed before Prince Franz Drago. "Good Lord," I said, "so that Sherry Vernet fellow is a restorationist, exactly." I was shaking my head in wonder at my friend's intelligence and skill at observation. When there was a knock at the door. "This will be our quarry," said my friend. "Careful now." Lestrade put his hand deep in his pocket, where I had no doubt he kept a pistol. He swallowed nervously. My friend called out, "Please, come in." The door opened. It was not Fernet, nor was it a limping doctor. It was one of the young street Arabs who earned a crust from running errands. "In the employ of Monsieur Street and Waka, as we used to say when I was young. Please, sirs," he said, "is there Mr. Henry Camberley here? I was asked by a gentleman to deliver a note." "I'm he," said my friend. "And for a sixpence, what can you tell me about the gentleman who gave you the note?" The young lad who volunteered his name as Wiggins bit the sixpence before making it vanish. Then he told us about the cheery cove who gave him the note was on the tall side with dark hair, and he added he had been smoking a pipe. "I have the note here, and take the liberty of transcribing it. My dear sir, I do not address you as Henry Caberlet, for it is a name which you have no claim. I am surprised that you do not announce yourself under your own name, for it is a fine one, and one that does you credit. I have read a number of your papers, when I have been able to obtain them. Indeed, I corresponded with you quite profitably 2 years ago about certain theoretical anomalies in your paper on the dynamic of an asteroid. I was amused to meet you yesterday evening. A few tips which might save you the bother in times to come, in the profession you are currently following. Firstly, a pipe-smoking man might possibly have a brand-new pipe in his pocket, and no tobacco, but it's exceedingly unlikely. At least as unlikely as the theatrical promoter with no idea of the usual customs of recompense on a tour, who is accustomed by a taciturn ex-army officer, Afghanistan, unless I miss my guess. Incidentally, while you are correct that the streets of London have ears, It might also behoove you in the future to take the first not to take the first cab that comes along. The cab drivers have ears too, if they choose to use them. You are certainly correct in one of your superstitions. I was indeed the one who lured the half-blood creature back to the room in Shoreditch. If it is any comfort to you, having learned a little of this recreational predilection, I had told him I had procured him a girl, abducted from a convent in Cornwall, where she had never seen a man, and that would be only taking his touch and the sight of his face to tip her over into a perfect madness. Had she existed, he would have feasted on her madness while he took her, like a man sucking the flesh from a ripe peach, leaving nothing behind but the skin and the pit. I have seen them do this. I have seen them do far worse, and not the price we pay for peace and prosperity. It is too great for that. The good doctor, who believes as I do, and who did indeed write our little performance, for he had some crowd-pleasing skill, was waiting for us with his knives. I send this note not as a catch-me-if-you-can taunt, for we are gone, the estimable doctor and I, and you shall not find us, but to tell you that it was good to feel that, if only for a moment, I had a worthy adversary, worthier by far than inhuman creatures from beyond the pit. I fear the Strand players would need to find themselves a new leading man. I would not assign myself Renette until the hunt is done and the world is restored. I beg you simply think of me as Raish. Inspector Lestrade ran from the room, calling to his men. They made young Wiggins take them to the place where the man had given him the note. And for all the world as if Renette the actor would be waiting for them, smoking a pipe. From the windows we watched them run, my friend and I, as we shook our heads. They will stop and search all the trains leaving London, all the ships leaving Albion for Europe, or the New World, said my friend, looking for a tall man and his companion, a smaller, thick-set medical man, with a slight limp. They will close the ports. Every way out of the country will be blocked. Do you think they will catch him, then? My friend shook his head. I may be wrong, he said, but I would wager that he and his friends are now only a mile or so away in the rookery of St. Giles, where the police will not go except by the dozen. They will hide up there until a hue and cry have died away, and then they will be about their business. What makes you say that? Because, said my friend, if our positions were reversed, it is what I would do. You should burn that note, by the way. I frowned, but surely it's evidence. It's a seditionary nonsense, my friend. And I should have burned it. I told Lestrade I had burned it when he returned, and he congratulated me on my good sense. Lestrade kept his job, and Prince Albert wrote a note to my friend, congratulating him on his deductions while regretting that the perpetrator was still at large. They have not yet caught Sherry Burnett, or whatever his name really is, nor any traces were found of his murderous accomplice, tentatively identified as former military surgeon John, or perhaps James, Watson. Curiously, it was revealed that he had also been in Afghanistan. I wonder if we had ever met. My shoulder, touched by the Queen, continued to improve. The flesh fills in as it heals, and soon I shall be a dead shot once more. One night, when we were alone several months ago, I asked my friend if he remembered the correspondence referred to him in the letter, for the man who signed himself Raish. My friend said that he remembered it well, and that Surgeon, for so the actor had called himself then, claiming to be an Icelander, had been inspired by an equation of my friend's to suggest some wild theories furthering the relationship between mass, energy, and the hypothetical speed of light. Nonsense, of course, said my friend, without smiling, but inspired and dangerous nonsense nonetheless. The palace eventually sent word that the queen was pleased with my friend's accomplishments in the case, and there the matter had rested. I doubt my friend will leave it alone, though it will not be over until one of them has killed the other. I kept the note. I have said things in the retelling of events that are not to be said. If I were a sensible man, I would burn all these pages. But then, as my friend taught me, even ashes can give up their secrets. Instead, I shall place these papers in a strong box at my bank, with instructions that the box may not be opened until long after anyone now living is dead. Although in the light of the recent events in Russia, I fear that may be closer than any of us care to think. S.M. Major, retired. Baker Street, London, New Albion, 1881. And there we have it. That was A Studying Emerald by Neil Gaiman. Thank you, and have a great time.